Hello guys, Void here coming back at y'all with another top 10 video. This is by Patreon request. One of my patrons, Rhino, has requested that I make a top 10 video of the best modal cards. Now to make things a little bit easier, I'm just going to choose the ones that I feel like are the best in Commander, because there are a ton of different modal cards that are good in other formats, and I just don't want to have to distinguish between which cards are good in specific formats, because then I have to say, oh well, there's good ones in Modern, and there's good ones in Standard, there's good ones in Legacy. So basically, for those of you who don't know, a modal card is a card that has different modes, and it's usually preceded by the text choose one or choose two or choose three, and the different modes, at least for cards in the past, were separated by semicolons. And I have an example here in Austere Charm from Return to Ravnica versus Austere Charm from the Master set that just came out. As you can see, the older ones were separated by semicolons, and the newer ones are errated to where they're just bulleted. I guess it made it a lot easier to distinguish between the different modes. It might have been a little bit ambiguous before. This time, with the bullets, it makes it a lot easier to see things, I guess. So if you see cards that are a little bit different, just know that they have the same thing in common, where it says choose one or choose two. The important word here is choose. So you have these different options, and I absolutely love the idea of making this top 10 because there are a ton of these cards, and it's not just exclusive to instants and sorceries, it's not just creatures or enchantments, it's a ton of different things that have different modes. So as always, we're going to start it off with some honorable mentions, cards that I think are good in this format, but I just don't think that they're good enough to make the top 10. The first one here is Umezawa's Jitte. You have some different options here. With Umezawa's Jitte, if you remove a counter, you get to choose one mode here. You can give the equipped creature +2/+2 until end of turn, or target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn, or you can gain 2 life. I like this card in Karlov of the Ghost Council. Makes a pretty good combination there if you want to go for Voltron, get more counters on it, and just try to make the most out of that high power and toughness. Pretty solid card. I just don't think it fits into as many Commander decks as a lot of the cards in the top 10 list do. Kolaghan's Command, one of my favorite Rakdos cards. It has some versatility. Returning creature cards from your graveyard to your hand and destroying artifacts is pretty solid. The other abilities, though, I don't think are as powerful. So for now, it's just an honorable mention. Then we have Esper and Bant Charm. Before a lot of the charms from Khans of Tarkir, I honestly feel like these two were the best of the best. Esper and Bant, they just give you some options. They allow you to remove enchantments, either counter spells, discard cards. I mean, there's a lot of different things you can do, and that's why the charms are so popular in this format. However, though, they are 3 different mana, so it limits what decks they can go into. They're still pretty good options in any Bant or Esper decks. I think they're pretty solid. I just think that there are better charms, better cards that do a lot different things that are just more useful, where all of the abilities are relevant. Now, with Bant and Esper, it just seems like there's some things that just don't really have a huge impact like you would want them to. And then we have the Sieges, the enchantments, I believe from Fate Reforged originally. We have Palace Siege, and we have Citadel Siege. These are just 2 of the 5. There's also a red one and a blue one and a green one. They all kind of do interesting things. Right off the bat, you have to choose between dragons or cons, which it might seem like, oh yeah, you get those options, but once you choose them, you're pretty much stuck with them. Unless you can return it to your hand, replay it, or flicker it, you really have no way of changing your mind later on. Once it's there, it's pretty much there. You can't decide, well, now the game has changed in a way where I need the other mode now. So that is a big reason why I don't think they deserve to be on the list, but they're still worth mentioning because they do see some play. Like the red one, for instance, it does see consistent play in mono red decks because red just lacks consistency, and that card just helps give it to it. And then we have Mystic Confluence, a 5 mana blue instant that gives you multiple different options. You can counter a spell unless they pay 3 mana. You can do that 3 different times. So choosing the modes out of 3, you can just straight up counter something unless they pay 9. Or you can draw a card, or you can return a creature to its owner's hand. So all of these are very good abilities, very good modes to choose from. The only reason why I wouldn't put it on the list is because the most important thing about it is the fact that you can counter a spell. I think that's what you're going to save it in your hand for the majority of the time. So basically, 3 mana leaks, it's not terrible, but you would rather just save it up to draw some cards or return creatures to their owner's hands. I think it's a fantastic spell in blue, don't get me wrong. I just think we have a lot better options though on this list, and if there was anything that I felt like could have been on the top 10, I think this was one of the confluences that could have been on there. I think the other 4 are kind of weak and don't really deserve to be there. I just think that this one puts in the most work. So now we move on to the actual top 10 here. Number 10 is Sultai Charm. Now I mentioned before with Esper Charm and Bant Charm that there were just some modes that weren't really relevant. and seemed very weak for the format. With Sultai Charm, it just seems that all 3 abilities are super relevant. You can destroy a monocolored creature, which is amazing because that's what the majority of creatures that you're going to run into in the format are going to be monocolored, likely. Kind of sucks if you run into multicolored creatures, but it is what it is. It's good removal. It's 3 different colors for 3 mana instant speed, so not going to complain too much. You get to destroy an artifact or an enchantment, which is amazing. You always want this in your instance, and you always want this in your removal. You want to deal with non-creature permanents, and that's so important. And you're able to draw 2 cards and then discard a card, so it's kind of like a loot effect. So yeah, all 3 abilities are super relevant, which honestly, I don't think that there's another one of these 3-color charms that puts in as much work. That's why it made the list over the other charms. Number 9 is Hull Breach. One of those older cards that doesn't have the bulleted modes, but it does have the semicolon and it does say choose, so it is one of the modal cards. You can destroy an artifact or an enchantment, or you get to destroy both. So you have the option of getting rid of 2 different permanents for just 2 mana. It's a spectacular card, one of the cards that I recommended just about every single one of my videos when it comes to Gruul and colors. It's a fantastic card. It is just sorcery speed, which is really the only drawback about it. Other than that though, the ability to hit 2 different permanents, there are some cards where the card has legal targets that it must have, but the fact that you don't have to destroy both and you get to just destroy one or the other is fantastic. You don't run into that little roadblock there. Number 8 is Marath, Will of the Wild, one of the awesome commander options from Commander 2013. Enters the battlefield with a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the amount of mana spent to cast it. That's not the modal ability though. The activated ability is modal though, so technically it does make this list. You get to remove X +1/+1 counters from Marath to choose between putting X +1/+1 counters on a creature, or have Marath deal X damage to target creature or player, or put an XX green elemental creature token onto the battlefield. A pretty popular commander option in Naya colors, so you know that within the whole modal options of cards, there aren't that many creatures, at least commanders, that are modal. So the fact that this is a commander top 10, I only find it appropriate to put in some awesome commander options that give you different modes to choose from. And there are really only 2 that I can think of, but really this one works well with doubling season effects, pretty popular. You can burn your opponents if you want to do that, or you can just make a gigantic little elemental creature token. Either way, not a terrible option in the colors. Pretty solid commander. Number 7 is Cryptic Command. Made the list over Mystic Confluence because honestly, I just think that the abilities there for 4 mana, yeah, it's a little bit more specific towards blue with the 3 blue mana, but you can just straight up counter a spell. You don't have to worry about your opponents having an incredible excess of mana to where they don't care about paying 3 extra or even 9 extra. You can choose to tap down your opponent's creatures, which is also fantastic for combat reasons, and you can also return a permanent to its owner's hand, and like Mystic Confluence, you can also draw a card. You get to choose 2 of these, so yeah, it's not 3. It's a little subjective, but honestly, I feel like for the reputation, Cryptic Command is a little bit better than Mystic Confluence because it just puts in a little bit more work when it comes to just straight up countering a spell, a little bit more reliable. Number 6 is a new card. It's Vindictive Lich. When Vindictive Lich dies, you get the different modes here to choose from, and you get to hit multiple different opponents with each mode. They must target a different opponent though. You get to force an opponent to sacrifice a creature, you get to force another one to discard 2 cards, and you get to force another one to lose 5 life. So that right there in a multiplayer game, which Commander for the most part is multiplayer, this isn't 1v1, you're going to take advantage of spreading the love around there. Giving each different player a taste of the different modes is fantastic, and it works well with graveyard recursion decks for the obvious reason of bringing it back, sacking it all over again if you want to, or just using it as a good blocker, or even swinging in there for the 4 damage, and your opponents are going to be reluctant to block it. They don't want to get hit with one of the modes. Pretty devastating if you can constantly recur it and then have it die over and over again. Very funny card, and I fell in love with it when I first saw it. It's a fantastic card. Number 5 is Breya Ethereum Shaper, really the most popular commander option that has different modes, and you get those different modes for paying 2 mana and sacrificing 2 artifacts, which combos pretty well because the different modes, you can either burn a player, deal 3 damage to their face, or you can hit something for -4/-4. That's very good. It's going to deal with a lot of different commanders. Or you can gain some life, which isn't ever really bad, especially if you want to grind out games, you want to stay in the game, survive. But yeah, she's very popular for commander. When it comes to building artifact decks, she sees a ton of play. She's a very popular combo commander as well. There are a ton associated with Ashnod's Altar, getting infinite mana, using her different modes. You can either burn a player to death, which is usually how you do it. Usually, once you have infinite mana, all you really do is just keep sacrificing Breya and another artifact, keep replaying Breya, more stuff to sacrifice, and just keep burning your opponents. Very popular option as commander, easily the most popular commander option with different modes. Number 4 is Rakdos Charm. I've always been bragging on this card. I think it's fantastic. You're capable of exiling all cards from a player's graveyard, so it's basically a Bajuka Bog there on the first mode. You also get to destroy an artifact on the second mode, which is never a bad thing. Non-creature removal again, fantastic in the format. But the third ability is probably the best one, and the main reason why I would recommend it for every single deck playing these colors. Each creature deals 1 damage to its controller. You wouldn't believe how many different combos rely on getting a massive amount of creatures on the field. Breya has a lot of combos that do that, a lot of different token decks in addition to her that just thrive on getting all these different creatures out there, and having them all deal 1 damage to their controller is going to win you the game a lot of the time, or it's going to, at the very least, knock out the most problematic player at the table. So that there for the utility, not a lot of cards on their own just save the day, like Rakdos Charm. So honestly, it has to be on this list, and it has to be pretty high. As far as 2-color charms go, this is easily the best one in Commander. Number 3 is Merciless Eviction. This card is fantastic, and one of the first times we saw the whole errata with the bulleted list instead of the semicolons, you have the option of exiling all artifacts, or all creatures, or enchantments, or planeswalkers. The only downside is that you can only choose one of them, but again, like choosing between different options, it's never really a bad thing, even if it is just choosing one. But being able to exile all different cards of the same permanent type, that is fantastic. Artifact decks have a ton of problematic artifacts. Enchantment-based decks, a ton of problematic enchantments. Even planeswalkers. There's not a ton of planeswalker-specific removal in this format. We have it in the form of just dealing with non-land permanents. But the fact that this specifically says planeswalker is fantastic. There's a ton of Super Friends decks. This is easily one of the best examples for auto-includes of cards with different modes. It just puts in so much work. Exiling removal is vastly superior to just destroying removal, so that's why it's higher on the list. However, number 2 is Austere Command, which doesn't exile, but what it does is allows you to choose 2 different options, and they're all pretty good. So unlike with Merciless Eviction, where it's 6 mana as well, but you only get to choose one option, you get to choose 2 different things. You get to deal with multiple different permanent types though, not just one. So you get to be able to destroy all creatures CMC 3 or less, or CMC 4 or greater. You get to choose between one of those. You also get to choose between artifacts and enchantments. So ideally what you want to do is destroy either all artifacts or enchantments with this, or destroy either artifacts or enchantments and whichever creatures are problematic. So it's a fantastic card, sees a ton of play in mono white decks, sees a ton of play in white decks for control purposes. Having different options is always a good thing. I can't stress this enough. If you don't have the optimal removal in your decks, you can't complain about your opponents getting the best of you when it comes to creatures. When you get overwhelmed and you wish you had a board wipe that could deal with it all, wish you had a board wipe that could deal with artifacts and enchantments, this is a perfect one to consider. Then we have number 1, which is not removal, but it is honestly, in my opinion, the most powerful card on this list. It is a modal card. You have to choose between 2 different options here. It is Tooth and Nail. I usually think people are sidetracked when they look at this card, they see the Entwine, and they kind of forget that it is modal. You get to choose one, and there's 2 different options here. You get to search your library for up to 2 creature cards, reveal them and put them into your hand, then shuffle your library. That's the first mode, and the second mode is put up to 2 creature cards from your hand into play. Now, while it doesn't give you a ton of options, most of the time you are going to just entwine it and get both. So you do have the option to get both, you just have to pay the entwine cost, which is going to make it 9 mana total. But I think it's also underrated the fact that you can always just choose one of the abilities. So if you have 2 creature cards in your hand that you want to put onto the field, you can do that. You can just pay the 7 mana and do that. If you just need to get 2 creature cards from your deck to your hand and you don't need to entwine it, well then you could just get those creature cards to your hand. But it's just a spectacular card. There's so many 2-card combos in the creature department when it comes to just winning games of Commander. We have the Palinchron Deadeye Navigator combo, we have the Zealous Conscripts Kiki Jiki combo, we have the Mikaean Hollow Triskelion combo. There's just a ton to choose from. and they're all devastating and going to win you the game, likely. So anyway guys, that was my top 10 list for Rhino, one of my awesome patrons. Thank you again for giving me this wonderful idea. I enjoyed this video. It was fantastic. I love looking at these cards, and I myself didn't realize how many different cards were considered modal, had different modes, all that. And I love it. And I'm sure there are certain cards that I might have missed. I had to look up all these different cards, and cards that specifically said choose 2 or choose 3. There's a difference. So if there's anything that I missed, please let me know. So anyway, you guys have a wonderful day. Void here signing off.